The title is Me, a 40-year-old male, and my wife, 40-year-old female, are no longer having sex. We are married for 15 years now, started going to couples therapy after sex twice a month wasn't enough for me. During the sessions, I realized that for years, my wife didn't want to have sex at all and did it only for me. She says that when we were having sex, she mostly enjoyed it, but she almost never wanted it. We agreed that we shouldn't have sex if she doesn't want to, and as a result, we had sex only twice in the last year. We do kiss and touch each other's bodies, but not genitals or anything explicitly sexual. My wife was sexually abused as a kid by a family member once and is suffering from major depression, medically treated. The fact that we have no sex life bothers her because of me, not that she misses it. But she can't bring herself to want it. I'm basically now in a platonic relationship, but thinking about sex all the time. We recently agreed, she offered, I thought about it but didn't share, that I should find a sexual partner or an escort because we are not seeing how this is going to be fixed. And after this, I had sex with an escort several times. She feels relieved that she doesn't have to do this and that I get some, but it's definitely not the same. Is that it? No more sex on this marriage? That's a tough situation. Victoria, do you have any initial kind of thoughts?
I don't think that their situation is abnormal. I think that there's a lot of relationships that struggle with frequency around sex and having mismatch in desire.
This is a situation that has a lot of layers to it.
Yes.
And there's some positives here. It sounds like this man's wife is getting treatment for depression and that they have tried couples therapy. I think that it demonstrates that there is a willingness to try to seek help and support, which is already like going to do a lot for them. He says his wife is only doing it for him. However, when they do have sex, she mostly enjoys it. And to me, that could be a sign that she has more of a responsive desire type, which we've covered in previous live streams. A responsive desire type is when you feel mental desire in response to something pleasurable. So first, something pleasurable needs to be happening. And for some people, that's actually initiating and starting to have some sort of intimate sexual contact with a partner. It can mean a lot of different things. There are other variables and factors to consider that would help somebody be more open to being responsive to pleasure in some way. So I think that is possibly a positive sign here, that once that ball gets rolling, his wife does seem to enjoy the sex that they are having. I'm not sure what went into the decision around we've decided if she doesn't want to do it, we just shouldn't. Because I think we might be talking about a couple of different things. If we're talking about consent and issues with consent, of course, nobody should feel pressured, intimidated, obligated to do anything that they're not comfortable with. But in this case, we're talking about what sounds like a loving relationship between two people who want to have a better sex life and feel upset around this struggle. If you put the ball in the court of somebody who has a responsive desire type and just kind of say, well, if we'll only have sex when you feel like it, you might be waiting a long time. That it's about knowing what is true for you as an individual and what your desire type is and what works for you, and then taking that information and applying it and creating the context where there is pleasure and you can be open to being sexual and being intentional about it. Because when I hear like, well, just wait for you to be in the mood, it kind of sounds like we're expecting both people to spontaneously be in the mood, which is not how some people's desire type functions.
Right. I agree with you. I like your point about consent because I think that fortunately there has been a lot more talk around consent in education with like the Me Too movement, things like that. And so I think that there is, more knowledge and pressure to be really mindful about consent. So I could see how someone would hear, oh, they're having sex when they don't want to, and like panic and be
Mm-hmm.
like, we're only going to have sex when you want to. So they're not feeling any sort of like, oh, this doesn't feel right, which is
Mm-hmm.
great.
Mm-hmm.
But then we're not having the education too around the responsive desire that you're talking about and
Yeah.
normalizing that. So we need both.
Right.
Both are important.
Right. And I think that I'm not sure what kind of couples therapy this couple has received, but somebody who specializes in sex therapy and who has some more knowledge base around that, I think would be best suited to help you understand those aspects of one another.
I feel for the both of them, when I
Mm-hmm.
think of someone who's experienced sexual abuse, it makes sense that they might feel triggered by sex or sexual activity and not have that desire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially probably that spontaneous desire that we've previously kind of covered.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for someone who's experienced that, like if they haven't done trauma work in therapy, like maybe undergone EMDR, which is eye movement and um,
Oof. I, that's all I got. Eye movement.
I had it, and then it left my brain. But that's been shown to be eye movement
Oh,
desensitization and reprocessing. Thank you.
thank you.
So people could undergo different types of trauma therapy to help them work through triggers
Mm-hmm.
and not feel so intense around them and maybe enjoy what is going on a little bit more, So that makes sense to me in terms of a lack of
Mm-hmm.
desire on her end, right?
Why somebody might kind of turn themselves off to sex and sexual desire. And sometimes that's like kind of taking a stance in one's own autonomy, right? If you see sex as a duty or an obligation, it then feels like it's another thing on your to-do list. It's a part of your role that you have as, let's say, a wife, um, and it becomes more about that, like, oh, I'm supposed to do this to please my husband, or my partner, not because I want it for myself. And I think that could, that comes from some systemic issues about gender roles and how you keep a man happy and how you um, keep him satisfied. What does a good spouse do, a good wife do? And you end up denying your own sexual part of yourself and making it about serving someone else, which is, that happens in a sexual relationship, and that those gender roles and norms can kind of bleed into a lot of other areas of life. So I think that could be something to explore, beliefs around the obligation or duty or to please someone else, and how you might be able to shift your core beliefs about yourself and your role in a relationship and connect with your own sexual self.
Right. When you talk about the different roles, I think about like whether or not you have children or you're caretaking, right? And you have to
Mm-hmm.
balance that like I'm kind of a mother or caretaker and I'm supposed to be a sexual being, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
those things don't necessarily go hand in hand. I think that's hard to balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it is, and that like idea of I have to take care of other people and serve people just expands. If you have kids, young kids, aging parents, the caregiver role that women often fall into um, can serve as a barrier to your own sexuality and your sexual self, because that's more about what you want for you simply because you want it and you desire it. And I think that being a survivor of sexual abuse kind of compounds that, this idea of like, I want autonomy of my own body. I want to be able to say no and to turn off this part of myself. Sometimes that can be just a step in reclaiming oneself, and not wanting to feel like you have a duty or an obligation or that something is being taken from you. So I think that that could also um, be a role for this wife potentially here. And I don't, the post does not mention if she is in individual therapy, or addressing her trauma in her own therapy, I think that would be something to consider as well. I think that opening up the marriage for the husband to engage with other sexual partners, whether that be just other relationships or escorts, I think is a risky move here, especially if they're not feeling like secure in their relationship and feeling like solid, like we've got a good foundation, we have our stuff figured out. Instead, he's trying to meet a need that they're struggling to figure out. And so it doesn't seem like they've landed in a place that feels really okay for the two of them. So I think that could, she's feeling relieved. Oh, now I don't have to fill that need. But I don't know all the details, of course, but it sounds like that might be something I would caution someone doing.
I agree with you. That can be a mistake that couples make when they're opening up their relationship, if they're doing it to save it. We had talked about this, talking about polyamory, right? So if this would be an attempt to save it because, they're not satisfied with their sex life right now, that doesn't usually end up good. And it's about working on your relationship first and making it secure.
Right. Right. I think that opening up your marriage is about expanding your experience, not necessarily trying to save something that doesn't feel okay in your current relationships. And then the other thing is she's on depression medication, it sounds like. It says it's being medically treated. I'm assuming that's what that meant. And a lot of depression medications also can impact sexual desire, or the ability, and with physical arousal, it can affect your ability to have an orgasm. So that can also potentially be a factor. Don't know how long she's been on medication, but it might be something for her to talk to her prescriber about. There might be an alternative she could try that doesn't have the same side effects. And so those are all factors I see kind of contributing to this situation for this couple.
That's a great point. And yeah, if you're feeling depressed like that alone, right, you're feeling fatigued, feeling unmotivated, and sex can really feel like work, right? And so I can see even just that alone, isolated, causing reduced desire there.
Well, I think that is everything I had to say on that
I had to.
Reddit post. Maybe whoever wrote this is listening right now. Wouldn't that be wild?
It would be wild. It'd be very random.
That would be like a intervention of the universe or something if that were the case.